Michael, can we begin?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. The first question we have is from Jacqueline. I have a question for Michael regarding Bhagavan's teachings. Coming from Krishna consciousness, I heard a lot about the personality of Godhead. For me, the big contrast between Advaita and God Bhakti is this non-verbal, non-conceptual experience of reality, which is non-different from God. Can you talk about the personality of God? It seems to me that if we have personalities which comes from God, mind, vasanas and all, God being knowledge and love must also have a personality. That's the first question.
Okay. Um, First, we need to understand what we mean by person. What distinguishes one person from another person? Basically, um, it's the the five sheaths, the panchakosha. Um, the panchakosha are the starting from the grossest to the subtlest. The grossest is this physical body that is called the Annamaya kosha, the kosha made of food. So that's the material aspect. Subtler than that is the pranamaya kosha. That is all the um, um, physiological functions that keep the body working, the breath, the flow of blood, the flow of the neural activity, everything. All these are called pranamaya kosha. Subtler than that is the mind. In this context, mind means the grosser aspects of the mind, perception, memory, thought, feeling, emotions, and so on. Subtler than that is the intellect, the judging, discriminating, discerning, understanding aspect of the mind. That is called the Vijnanamaya kosha, or buddhi. And subtler than that is the will, which is called the chittam or Anandamaya kosha. It's also called the Karana Sarira, the causal body. So all these five together make up what is called the body. And this body is essentially this body consisting of these five sheaths is what distinguishes one person from another. Um, but as Krishna himself says in the Gita, he is beyond all these things. As he says, Ahamatma Gudakesha in chapter 10, verse 20, he says, that's the chapter in which he enumerates his glories. That is, he starts with, but he is the self in each and every one of us. That means he is what we actually are. And he distinguishes this Atma from these five sheaths in chapter 13. He begins by saying that distinguishing the kshetra from the kshetrajna. The kshetra is the field, which is the body. That is actually all phenomena constitute the field, but essentially but it's through this body that we are aware of all other things. So the most essential aspect of the field is this sarira. When he talks about sarira, the body, he's not just talking about the physical body. He's talking about all these five sheaths. And distinct from that is the kshetra. Sorry, the kshetrajna. That is, kshetra means the field. So this body is the field. This body consisting of five sheaths is the field. Distinct from that is the kshetrajna. In that verse, when he talks about kshetrajna, he's referring to the jiva, the, the individual soul, or ego. So what he's drawing the distinction there is between the knower and what is known. The field is what is known, but kshetrajna is the knower of that field. So the knower is distinct from all the things that are known. So there he distinguishes what we are from all these things that we now take ourselves to be. Now we take ourselves to be this body, this bundle of five sheaves, but this is not what we actually are. So he begins by distinguishing us from the body. In other words, he distinguishes the ego from the body which it takes to be itself. That is, as ego, we always experience ourselves as I am this body, I am this person consisting of these five sheaves. But ego is distinct from these because these are things known. Ego is the knower. Then in the next verse, he says, I am also the knower in all fields. That is interpreted differently by different people. Some people say that as if there are two selves, an Atma and a Paramatma. But obviously there aren't two selves. We are just one self. Ego is that I that is identified, that is aware of itself as I am this body. But what is the essence of the ego is the pure awareness I am. That is Krishna, that is Atma. That's when Krishna says I am Atma, he's that I am in each and every one of us. So he is what we essentially are. So he's very clearly distinguishing between the person, and if we take the English term person, it derives from the Greek persona. Persona in Greek dramas, the actors would have a mask. The mask was the persona. The sona is sound, persona is through which the sound comes. So they have a mask, and through that the sound comes. So the persona is a mask. It's not what we essentially are. That's why Krishna draws that distinction between the kshetra and the kshetrajna. And though the kshetra, in its broadest sense, includes everything that is known, all phenomena, he's specifically talking about one aspect of the kshetra, which is this body, because it's only through this body, consisting of five sheaths, that we know all other phenomena. But we are not. This body is something known by us, so it is the field. We are the knower of the field. But what the knower of the field is ego. But what is essential in ego is that fundamental awareness I am. That is Krishna, that is God. So, is God a person? In a certain sense, we can say that is what is most essential in a person. Apart from if we go beyond these five sheaths and consider what is most essential in a person, is the consciousness or awareness. So that consciousness or awareness is the essence of the person, or rather it's the essence of ego, which is what takes the person to be I. So if we go to the very essence of personality, it is that consciousness. So obviously God is the infinite consciousness. So in that sense, he's the very essence of personality. But a personality is a limitation. If you have each person is separate from each other person. But Krishna is not separate from anything. He's the self in each and every person, in each and every living being. Person here doesn't just mean human people. It includes all sentient creatures, all living beings. So he is the essential awareness in all of these things, in all of these different living beings. So he is, in a certain sense, we can say he's the essence of all persons. But he himself is beyond the limitations of a person. Another important aspect of being a person is love. We all, as a person, whether we are human or whatever form we identify ourselves with, whether with a human form or a form of some other animal, a cow or a cat or a dog or a horse or elephant or whatever, monkey or whatever, a dolphin or a fish or whatever it is, And all all these different forms, they all display love in one form or another. For example, all creatures show love for their offspring. That's natural. So love is also an aspect that is common to all persons. And God is love itself. In Tamil, they have this, it's actually from a verse of Tirumula, Ambe Shivam. Uh, love, uh, love alone is Shiva. Love alone is God. And Bhagavan, in his Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, he repeatedly refers to Arunachala as Amburu Arunachala, Arunachala, the very form of love. So, as the consciousness in us and the love in us, in that sense, God is the essence of all persons, but He is beyond the limitations of persons. The person who asked this question says that they're coming from the Krishna consciousness, that's the ISKCON background. In ISKCON, they often refer to Advaitins as impersonalists, but that is a complete misrepresentation. I have yet to meet an Advaitin who would claim to be an impersonalist. God is that is it's absurd. I mean, to say God is impersonal is even more absurd than saying he's a person. If we say he's a person, we're limiting him. If we say he's a non-person, we are denying the very essence, which is the consciousness and the love, which is the very essence of God. So God is neither a person he's neither personal nor impersonal. He's beyond the limits of both of these. That is the distinction, personal, impersonal. This is a dvandva, a pair of opposites, but he's beyond all pairs of opposites. So we can't say either that he's a person or that he's not a person, because he's beyond all these differences. However, and this is very important to understand, so long as we experience ourselves as a person, by experiencing ourselves as a person, we have limited ourselves. So God, who is the unlimited whole, seems to be different from us. Seems to be different, but at the same time, he cannot be different because nothing can be. If we were other than God, God would thereby be limited. But if God is infinite, nothing can be other than him. So we are seemingly different, but essentially non-different. This is the basic philosophy of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, of which ISKCON is an offshoot of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Their essential philosophy is what is called Achintya Bheda Abheda. Abheda means difference, Abheda means non-different. So though we are seemingly different from God, essentially we are non-different. That is, God is our very being. Because he's the infinite whole, nothing can be other than him. So he is our very being. He is our very Atma, as Krishna says in the Gita. So Advaitins are not impersonalists, but Advaita recognizes that God is beyond this duality, this distinction of personal and impersonal. He is he's definitely not impersonal. He's also not personal in the sense he's not limited as a person, but he's the very essence of all personhood, in that he's he is consciousness itself, he is love itself. So, and of course, he's being itself. So he's our very being. So we can't say he's not, we can't limit him as a person, but we also can't say he's impersonal. That both would be wrong. But so long as we take ourselves as a person, because we seem to be separate from God, God seems to us to be a person because he is that embodiment of pure love. We experience him as if he were a person. So long as we experience this distinction between ourselves and God, we can and should have a personal relationship with God. So Advaita is not at all opposed to a personal relationship with God. If you read Bhagavan's Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, his 5 hymns on Arunachala, you can see what an intense, intimate, personal relationship he's expressing there with God in the form of Arunachala. But at the same time, though he's seemingly he's he's um, he's addressing God in the form of Arunachala, but he's also repeatedly saying that Arunachala is what is shining in the heart as I. So it's Advaita is beyond this distinction of person imperson. That is the personal relationship with God is appropriate so long as we experience ourselves as a person. It is appropriate to consider God as a person. But when we know ourselves as we actually are, and thereby know God as he actually is, because God is what we actually are, he's our very being, then we transcend this all the limitations of personhood. So, but as I say, it's a great misrepresentation of Advaita to say Advaitins are impersonalism. Impersonalism has absolutely no place whatsoever in Advaita. Having a personal relationship with God does have a place, not impersonalism. Though God is ultimately, he transcends all the limitations of personhood, and we can know him as he is only by transcending the limitations of the personhood that we have now taken upon ourselves by rising as ego. So it's the lady who asked the question said, for me, the big contrast between Advaita and God Bhakti is this non-verbal, non-conceptual experience of reality. Advaita is that is to see Advaita as distinct from God Bhakti is a misunderstanding. Advaita is not distinct from Advaita is the very pinnacle of Bhakti. That is, Advaita is the state of non-two. That non-two-ness, the state uh, in which we cease to be separate from God, that is achieved by complete surrender, without all-consuming love, all-consuming bhakti. We will not be willing to surrender ourselves. Bhakti means love. And the real sign of love, that if we truly love someone, we are not concerned about what we can get from that person. We are concerned about what we can give to that person. And the ultimate give is to give ourselves wholly. So Advaita is the path of complete surrender. So it's the very pinnacle of the path of devotion, of bhakti. That's why Bhagavan often used to say, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Because without bhakti, there's no way we can attain jnana. Because in order to attain jnana, we need to surrender ourselves completely. So long as we remain separate, we are in a state of ajnana. Because separation is not real. So long as we experience ourselves as separation, we are still in ignorance, in ajnana. So in order to attain jnana, which is the experience of absolute oneness, we need to be willing to surrender ourselves completely. That is, surrender this, our seemingly separate being. We need to surrender completely. And that is achieved by this practice of Atma-vichara. That is, as Bhagavan has explained, the nature of ego or jiva is it rises by grasping form. That is, ego itself is formless. It's got no form of its own. So ego seems to have a separate existence only when it grasps the form as I. So in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, Bhagavan, he describes ego as Uruvatra Peyahande, the formless demon ego. It's formless because it's got no form of its own. So ego seems to exist as a separate entity only when it grasps the form of a body as I. So he says about ego, grasping form, it comes into being. That is, without attaching itself to a form, it doesn't exist at all. So grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. That is, ego can endure only by constantly identifying itself with a body consisting of 5 sheaths. And having grasped a body of 5 sheaths, it's then constantly dwelling on other forms. So he says in the third sentence, he says, Urupatri undu mika ongum. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That is, form, since ego is formless, because ego is the subject, the awareness, all forms are objects. So when he says grasping form, he means attending to things other than ourselves, attending to things other than what we actually are. So long as we're attending to other things, we seem to be limited. So if attending to other things, being aware of forms, phenomena, objects, vishayas, is the food on which ego lives. And then he says, Uruvittu urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. Because it can't remain for a moment without grasping form, it's constantly, if it leaves one form, it grasps another form. We can understand that in 2 ways. Moment to moment, the mind is going from one thing to another thing to another thing. We're constantly, our attention is constantly shifting from one thing to another. So when we let go of one thing, we grasp another thing. In that sense, another sense is when we leave this body, we grasp another body. So that is because the very nature of ego is to grasp form. But he then says, Tedinal otum pidicum. If sought, it takes flight. That is, if ego seeks to know its own reality, if it seeks to know who am I, it takes flight. That means it runs away, it disappears. What he implies by that is, so long as we're attending to things other than ourselves, we seem to be ego. We seem to have a separate existence. But if we turn our attention back to ourselves to see what we actually are, no such thing as ego is there to be found. All that remains is the pure awareness that we actually are. And this practice of Atma-vichara is not, it's also very clearly taught by Krishna in the Gita. In chapter 6 of the Gita, he's often referring to attending to ourselves in one way or another. He said, I think in verse 18, if I remember correctly, the one who is always had their attention on Atma, they are yukta. They are the ones who have achieved the goal of yoga. And in verse 25, he says, Atma samstam manakritva na kinchitapi chintayat. Fix the mind on Atma, on yourself. Do not think of anything else. And fixing the mind on Atma is the pinnacle of God Bhakti, because Krishna is the Atma on which we are fixing our attention is Krishna himself. That is what Krishna essentially is. He's our own very being. So it's an artificial divide to talk about Advaita and God Bhakti. Yes, it's true. We can have Bhakti for a name and form of God without having any idea about Advaita. But you can't have the experience of Advaita without all-consuming love for God. God, but with the understanding that God is not something other than ourselves. God is our own very self. God is our own very being. So the people at different stages of spiritual development view these things from uh, different perspectives, and so they see them differently. But from the perspective of Advaita, particularly from the perspective of Bhagavan's teachings, there is no contradiction whatsoever between Advaita and Bhakti. They are one and the same. Advaita is the experience of Advaita, the experience of non-two-ness, the experience of one only without a second. That is the very pinnacle, that is the flowering of Bhakti, we can say. The blossoming of Bhakti is jnana. And the very heart of jnana is bhakti. So we can't separate them. They're inseparable. They go together. Though at early stages they may seem to be distinct. As we go deeper, if we go deeper in the path of bhakti or the path of jnana, it'll be abundantly clear that they are not two different paths. They are one and the same path. So, in answer to the question whether God is a person, he's the very essence of all persons, but he himself is beyond the limits of all personhood. He's beyond all the limits of being a person, but he's the very essence of all persons. So long as we experience ourselves as a person, God seems to us to be a person, and we can and should have a personal relationship with him. But the aim of our personal relationship should be to give ourselves wholly to him. When we give ourselves wholly to him, then we have no. If we still remain separate, we haven't given ourselves wholly to him. When we give ourselves wholly to him, there's only him, not us. We lose ourselves completely in him. Is that a satisfactory answer to that question?
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you. There's such clarity. Thank you, Michael.
Right.
Perfect.
Thank you, Michael. So the next question we have is from Tim. Do we have a duty to try and overcome or be free of any particular fear that holds us back in life, other than the practice of Atma-vichara? Thank you, Michael. That's the question.
The practice of Atma-vichara is the way to root out all fears and all desires. That is, desire and fear are two sides of the same coin. If we have desire for something, we'll fear either not attaining it, or if we attain it, we'll fear to lose it. So we have fear. Why do we fear death? Because we have desire for life. If we had no desire for life, if we weren't attached to this body, if we didn't take this body to be I, we wouldn't fear its death. So fear, there's no fear without desire. So it's it's the other side of desire. And for whom is desire and fear? They're only for ego. When we don't rise as ego, as in sleep, in sleep we experience no desire, no fear, because we haven't risen as ego, and therefore we aren't experiencing ourselves as something separate. As soon as we have a seemingly separate existence, we're vulnerable. There's so many other things that threaten us, so we have fear of other things. The fear that is the state of fearlessness is only the state of oneness, the state in which we are aware of ourselves as one only without a second. So Atma-vichara is the only way to eradicate the very root of all fear and desire, namely ego. If we get rid of ego, then we get rid of all limitations. Then what is there to desire, and what is there to fear? There's nothing. There's only our own self as the infinite Satchidananda that we actually are. So there's no scope in that in our real state, our natural state, our state of, of, of Satchidananda. There's no room in that state for any desire or fear to arise, because there's no one for whom it could arise. Fear and desire are only for ego. You eradicate ego and you eradicate fear and desire. So regarding do we have a duty to overcome or be free of any particular fear, even if we are able to get rid of one fear, some other fear will be there. That is, fear is the very nature, desire is the very nature of ego. Or let me be more precise. The very nature of ego is to have desire. And so long as we have desire, we will also have fear. So these are the very nature of ego. So we cannot free ourselves from desire or free ourselves from fear without freeing ourselves from ego. And that is what the practice of Atma-vichara is all about, eradicating ego.
Next, we have a series of questions from Jay. Jay, please go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Michael. Hope you're doing
Hi.
good. Uh, this is my first question to you. Forever. I'm calling from India,
Mm,
and I was talking to Dhruv about certain topics, and I wanted to bring it up in here.
mm,
We all are here because we wanted to attain self-realization, or at least understand how to approach that destiny,
yeah,
right? And we all face a lot of challenges in the process.
yes,
One such challenge which I face, I mean, one of the most important things to attain self-realization is to being self-aware.
yes,
And to me today, that is the greatest challenge I'm facing. We all we all have a lot of commitments. We all we keep working. We have things to think. Our
yeah,
five senses are always active and exposed to the outside world. Unless we stop the exposure of our five senses to the outside world, we'll not be able to completely focus on ourselves. Uh, so, so my pressing need is that when I focus on something, some commitments, I instantly lose the connection to myself, the awareness to myself, and also I it creates a kind of a stress, and it a breathing pattern changes. So, is there a three-way connection between self-awareness, our thoughts, and our breath? What are the effective ways to you know be self-aware always and still be able to think
right.
effectively?
Okay. Um, First thing we need to it's important to understand these things very clearly. We are never not self-aware. Even if we are undergoing a lot of stress and things, so many demands on our attention, we, who is experiencing all that stress? Who is experiencing all those demands on their attention? I am. So that the awareness I am is always there. And that is like Bhagavan said, it's like the screen in a cinema. What Because we are so um, we are so interested in the pictures that are appearing on the screen, we overlook the screen. But actually, we're not seeing anything other than the screen. We're just seeing pictures. Where are the pictures? They're appearing only on the screen. So we need to understand that self-awareness is always there in the background. Whatever we may be doing, whatever we may be experiencing, it's I am doing it, I am experiencing it. So that awareness I is the foundation. That is the ground on which all this is built. That is the screen on which all these experiences appear and disappear. So if we have that understanding, that will help us to hold on to that awareness of our being, even in the midst of all these activities. It, it, but in order to gain the skill to do so, it requires a lot of practice. So we need to try as much as possible to keep our attention on ourselves. The driving force behind this is bhakti, is our love for it. An analogy I sometimes give, supposing a very dear friend of yours, someone who is very, very dear to you, has had an accident, is in hospital on life support. The doctors are not able to say whether your friend is going to survive or not. And even if they survive, whether they're going to recover fully or not, the doctors cannot say. They're doing their best to save them. So you have all your duties. You have to go to work. You have to attend to all your family duties and everything. But in the midst of all your duties, will not the thought of your friend be constantly there in the back of your mind? You'll be doing your work perfectly efficiently, but there in the back of your mind, that thought about your friend, that anxiety about your friend, that concern for the well-being of your friend will be there constantly at the background of your mind. If we had so much love to know ourselves that we have for our friends and our dear ones, we will be able to hold on to this self-attentiveness even in the midst of other activities. That's one way of viewing it. Another way is, if we think of it, from the time we get up in the morning to the time we go to sleep at night, we attend to so many things. We think of so many thoughts. But how many of the things we think about are actually necessary at that moment? For example, if you drive a car, you may drive to work every day. Or if you don't drive, you may take a bus or a tram or an underground or whatever. While traveling to work, whether by car or whatever, so many thoughts will be there in your mind. You may be thinking about problems in the office. You may be thinking about problems at home. You may be thinking about so many things. But none of those thoughts that you're thinking are actually necessary at that very moment. So if we begin to cultivate this practice of self-attentiveness, we can slowly replace all the unnecessary thoughts with self-attentiveness. And then if some of our time we're attending to things we actually need to be attended to then and there, that's fine. Slowly, Sadhu Om used to give a very nice analogy. He said there was a poor Arab. He was a small merchant. He would buy things in one town and he would take them to another town and sell them. So he was just eking out a very basic livelihood by buying and selling things. And he had a camel. So he would buy things, he would load them on the camel, and they would go walking through the desert. The desert, of course, is very, very hot in the daytime, but at night it becomes very cold. So when at the time of sunset, he would stop the camel, he would unload the camel, he would tie the camel to a peg or whatever, and he would set up his little tent and he'd get in the tent. One night it was particularly cold, and so he was lying in his tent, and the camel put its nose in the tent. And he thought, poor creature, it's walking all day in the hot sun, carrying a heavy load. At least let him, and it's very cold outside now, at least let him keep his nose warm by keeping it in the tent. And after some time he woke up and he found the whole head of the camel was inside. And he thought, okay, poor creature, let it be. There's room in the tent for me and the camel's head. And next time he woke up, the feet were also in the tent. By the time he got up in the morning, the camel had occupied the whole tent and he was outside. Sadhu Om used to tell this story and said, at least let the camel's nose in the tent. That means if we begin to introduce this practice of self-attentiveness in our life, it will slowly, slowly intrude more and more into our life, eventually will be pushed out of the picture, and that alone will remain. So we all have moments in the day when our mind is free of needing to attend to something immediately. We can take advantage of every spare moment to be aware of ourselves. This is not a difficult practice. Bhagavan says it's extremely easy. What can be easier than attending to ourselves? It seems difficult to us because we are so interested in attending to other things. We think so many unnecessary thoughts. We think about war. There's wars that are happening here and calamities that are happening here and there. What can we do about these things? I mean, it's terrible, all these things that are happening in the world. But can we do anything to prevent it? Can we stop these wars? No, we can't. So letting our mind dwell on these things, and even things in our immediate life, there's so many problems we all face in life. But often we face problems, we can't solve it. Somehow or other, the problem's going to sort itself out sooner or later, but it occupies so much of our attention. So we need to slowly wean our mind off its concern with other things and cultivate a great, passionate love to know what we actually are, to attend to ourselves. It's in the Gita in chapter 6, after Krishna explains about fixing the mind on oneself, that is what is to be done, Arjuna says, but the mind it's easier to control the wind, but to control the mind. And Krishna says, yes, but it is possible by abhyasa, by vairagya and abhyasa. That is the practice and the freeing our mind from its desires and attachments, all its passions. Raga is the passion that we have for this world. We need to develop vairagya, freedom from that passion. And we do that by the practice of self-attentiveness. That's why I referred earlier to chapter 6, verse 25, in which Krishna says, Atma-samstam mana kritva na kinchitapi chintayat. Make the mind fixed on yourself. Do not think of anything else. That's the last line of the verse. The first line, he begins by saying, sane, sane, gradually, gradually. That is, we can't achieve this overnight. We have cultivated such strong Vishaya vasanas, inclinations to attend to other things. We need to, it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice to slowly, gradually wean our mind off its interest in other things and to cultivate this interest in knowing what we actually are. So as Bhagavan says, what's it matter however many thoughts arise? In the 6th paragraph of Nana, what's it matter however many thoughts arise? As and when each thought arises, it's necessary to investigate to whom it arises. Vigilantly, as and when each thought arises, if we investigate to whom, it'll be clear to me. And if we then hold on to that me, if we investigate who am I, investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever has appeared back towards ourselves. And having turned our attention back towards ourselves, we need to hold on to that self-attentiveness. So he says, if one investigates who am I, the mind will return to its birthplace, that the source from which it's risen, and the thought that had risen will subside. By practicing in this manner, for the mind, the strength to abide in its source will increase. So we need, this abhyasa is absolutely essential. There's no shortcut. We need to be very dedicated to this. Is that a helpful answer?
And thank you so much for that, Michael. So in the verge of practicing self-awareness, or the more and more I start being self-aware, will my ability to think increase or decrease? Is there a connection between both of it?
Well, let's not say self-awareness, because self-awareness is always there. As I said, that's a background. It's self-attentiveness that is required. That is, we are always aware I am, but we're always self-aware, but we're negligently self-aware. So we need to be attentively self-aware. We need to attend to that fundamental self-awareness. The more we attend to that, the more our mind is free of unnecessary thoughts. So the things that need to be done, it'll do all the better. So it won't obstruct what needs to be done. And in fact, if we go deeper into it, Bhagavan says, whatever needs to be done will be made to do it. That is, he says in the note he wrote for his mother, Avarava prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angangirindu artavipan. That means in accordance with the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that, meaning God or Guru, being there, being in the heart of each one of us, Artavipan will make us dance. So whatever actions we need to do, in accordance with our prarabdha, he will make us do them. So, for example, most of us have family. We have parents, we have husband or wife or children, and so on and so forth. We've got so many responsibilities. Because it's our prarabdha to fulfill that role. As you're probably a husband and you probably have children, so you've got certain responsibilities to your wife and to your children. And you may have elderly parents, you may have responsibility to them. There's so many responsibilities you have. And in order to fulfill your responsibilities to them, you are employed. And so you have responsibilities to your employer. All these things, it's all according to prarabdha. So what you need to do in order for your prarabdha to unfold, you will be made to do. So actually, the more we withdraw our attention from other things and focus it on ourselves, the more we are not interfering with what God is making us do. So we are simply withdrawing ourselves and let him drive this body and mind to do whatever is necessary. So we hand over the reins to him. The more we are self-attentive, the more we are willingly handing over the reins to him. Of course, the reins are always in his hands. He's the charioteer of our life. But we are usually interfering by we want to go this way, I want this, I want that, so we're constantly interfering. Of course, he's doing his work perfectly, he's making us do whatever needs to be done, but we have so many desires that are interfering, constantly trying to interfere. Of course, they're not actually, whatever we desire, whatever we try for, it's not changing what is destined to happen. It's all going to happen as it's going to happen, as Bhagavan made clear in that note to his mother. What is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. What is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstruction. So however much we want to experience something and try to experience it, if it's not destined, it's not going to happen. If it is destined, however much we try to avoid it, it's not going, we can't avoid it. We can want to avoid it, we can try to avoid it, we cannot avoid it. So everything is happening according to destiny. So as he says in Nana, in the 13th paragraph of Nana, there's one Parameshwara Shakti that is driving all karyas. When such is the case, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to that, be constantly thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like this? We need to hand over the reins to him. Let him take care of what we should do, what we should not do. Leave that to him, because he's going to anyway make us do what we're meant to do. Our only duty is to hold on to him in our heart, where he's ever shining as our own being, I am. But in order to do that, it takes a lot of practice. So slowly, sanai sanai, mella mella, as Bhagavan says in Tamil, gradually, gently, we need to wean the mind off its concern about all other things And eventually we need to be concerned. Our aim is to be concerned about one thing and one thing alone, knowing who am I.
That gives a lot of clarity. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. And of course, don't worry about failure. We all fail time and time and time again. But the very fact that we are trying to follow this path, that's all that is required. So long as we're trying, everything, grace will take care of everything else. We have to be sincere in our efforts to follow this path and leave everything else to him.
Thank
So
you, Michael.
we shouldn't be disheartened by our failures. If we are disheartened by our failures, we'll never succeed because we all fail time and time and time again. But we need to keep on trying. That's all.
Thank you, Michael. I have a quick question, Michael, follow-up
Yeah.
question. So you said about the camel story.
Yes.
Is the opposite also true? If we stop doing self-investigation, will it slowly go away, or that's not the case?
Well, we may sometimes um, lose our enthusiasm to follow this path. But grace is doing its work. Even when we are not doing anything, grace is doing its work. And once we've been drawn to this path, we may sometimes seem to be not following it with so much enthusiasm, but we can never, there's no turning back. Because nothing, that is why we start to follow this path, because we find that nothing else in this world is satisfactory. We have tried to find happiness in the things of the world, the experiences of the world for countless lives, and we've been disappointed time and time and time again. So we've reached a stage where we know that however much we may still have hopes that we can experience, we can get happiness from this or that, we know in the back of our mind we're going to be disappointed again. We're not going to achieve the happiness we want from this. And very quickly, this body is going to go away and it's going to go on and on and on. So once we've reached this point where we recognize that the happiness we are seeking is not to be found outside, it's to be found only within, there's really no turning back. We may sometimes be slow in our progress, but we can't really turn back.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. I
Yeah.
think that's helpful. Yeah,
Yeah.
because sometimes I lose interest. Not interest. I will say sometimes the world is pulling me away
I
from
know.
this, and
It's
sometimes I
the same
forget it,
for
and then
all
I
of
come
us.
back to it.
It's the
Yeah,
same for all of us.
yeah. Okay. Thank you, Michael. The next question we have is, what is swarupa dhyana, and how to practice it?
Okay. What dhyana means meditation or contemplation. So basically, it means attending. So what we are to attend to, what we are to meditate on or contemplate is swarupa. Swarupa means what we actually are. It's our very being, the fundamental awareness I am. So in essence, it means being self-attentive. But the self we are to attend to is not this person whom we seem to be, but the I that is aware of itself as I am this person. Of course, the I that is aware of itself as I am this person is not swarupa, it's ego. But the essence of ego is swarupa. Ego is that which is aware of itself as I am this body. The essence of that awareness, I am this body, is the fundamental awareness I am. That is what we need to attend to. That is swarupa. That Bhagavan used that term swarupa dhyana in the 10th paragraph of Nana. And he said we should hold on to it vida pidiyai pidikavendam. That is, tenaciously we should hold on to that self-attentiveness. And in the next paragraph, the 11th paragraph, he uses a similar term, swarupa smarana. Smarana means remembrance. In fact, it means the same. And he says in there, he says, Oruvan tan swarupam adayam varayel, nirantara swarupa smaranaye kai patruvanayin adu andre podam. That means until one attains swarupa, if one holds on to nirantara swarupa smarana, nirantara means uninterrupted, unbroken swarupa smarana, that alone is sufficient. Adu Andre Podam. So what we need to do, of course, none of us are holding on to it uninterruptedly, but that is what we are working towards that. So we need to try to be self-attentive as much as possible. Of course, it's possible to be self-attentive all the time. It seems impossible for us because we've got such strong Vishaya Vasana, such strong inclinations to attend to other things. But the more we practice, the more we'll be able to hold on to at least a certain degree of self-remembrance, even in the midst of all the other activities. Because whatever else we may be doing, whatever else we may be experiencing, in the background, there's always that fundamental experience, that fundamental awareness, I am. That is Swarupa. That is what we should hold on to.
In Arunachala Pancharatnam, I know like Bhagavan was asked to talk about different paths like bhakti, jnana, and so on. So in that, can you talk about the karma portion, because it was not clear to me like where he mentions that. So can you explain that?
Karma, he doesn't actually. Bhagavan doesn't take the path of karma as separate from the path of bhakti. We can see that in Upadesha Undya. In Upadesha Undya, he first says the fruit of karma passing away remain as seeds but cast us in the great ocean of action. Therefore, action does not give liberation. That he says in verse 2. In verse 3, he says, however, if the action is done nishkamya, that is without desire for any fruit, but just kartanokakam, done for God, done for the love of God, that will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. So he connects the nishkarmya karma with bhakti in that verse itself. He begins the verse saying, kartanokakam, done for God, nishkarmya karma, a nishkarmya karma that's done for God. So he's connecting it with bhakti. And then in the next verse, he begins to talk about what are the actions we can do, nishkamya. We have three instruments of action. There's mind, speech, and body. So or body, speech, and mind. So he says, Didumidu puja japamam dhyanam. That is this puja, japa, and dhyana. These are actions of body, speech, and mind. And in this order, each is superior to the previous one. What that means is the puja is an action done by body. Japa is action done by speech. Dhyana is action done by mind. Better than puja is japa. Better than japa is puja. Why? When he says better there, he means it's more efficacious in purifying the mind, because that's the aim of all these nishkamya karmas. It's the purification of mind. That's the benefit we get of these. So obviously puja, japa, and dhyana, it requires that love for God. You're doing it not for any result. Of course, people do all sorts of puja, japa, and dhyana, desiring all sorts of results. That is kamya. That's not what Bhagavan is talking about. He's talking about nishkamya puja, nishkamya japa, nishkamya dhyana. So that is done, what is done just for the love of God, not for anything we can get from the action, but just we're doing it just for the love of God. That will purify the mind. And more effective than puja is japa, more effective than japa is dhyana, more effective in purifying the mind. Then he describes each of those in turn, the puja, the japa, and the dhyana. Then he says, in verse 8, rather than anya bhava, rather than meditating on God or worshipping God as something other than ourselves, ananya bhava, meditation on what is not other, with the understanding that He is I, that is best among all. So up to verse 7, he's talking about karma, but he's connecting karma with bhakti. So likewise in Arunacha Pancharatnam, it's in the final verse that he talks about that indirectly he mentions the karma. What he says is, Unnidatil oppuvita ullatal, by the mind that is offered to you, surrendered to you, eporodum, always, unne kandu, always seeing you, elamum unnuruvai, seeing everything as your form, anya mil ambu, that anya, he brings in ananya, so anya mil means without anya. That's the same as ananya. Anya mil ambu, that otherless love, that is having love for God as not other than ourselves, and seeing everything as His form. Ambuseo manon Arunachala belhum imburuvam unilande. They subsiding you the form of love. They achieve victory, subsiding in you the form of love. So, where does karma come in this? Very indirectly. That the initial qualification is unnidatil oppuvita ullatal, with the mind or the heart totally offered to you, surrendered to you. When the mind is completely surrendered to Him, we see Him always, because we're not seeing Him as a name or form, we're seeing Him as our own being. And we're seeing everything as His form. Elamum unnuruvai, all are seeing Him as His form. So it's not, we're not doing any particular karma, but if we do any action, it will be nishkarmya karma, because when we see everything as Bhagavan's form, and when we always see Bhagavan, that implies to see Him always, we need to see Him as He actually is. We can't see His form always. Even if throughout the waking state we're meditating on His form, when we fall asleep, we're going to forget it. But he says eporodom, always. So when he says always seeing you, it implies seeing Him as He actually is, as our own being. So when we see Him as our own being, that's why he says anya milambu, the otherless love, because we're not having love for Him as something other than ourselves, but as our own very self, as our own very being. So in that state, actually he's describing the state of jnana here. In that state, whatever we do will be perfect nishkarmya karma. In Maharshi's Gospel, in one place, Bhagavan said the Atma-jnani alone can be a perfect karma yogi. We may try to do things without desire, but so long as ego's there, there'll be some desire to a greater or lesser extent will be tainting that. So if we want perfectly desireless action, we need to eradicate this, the one who has desire, namely ego. That is unidatil opuvita, ulatal, that by the mind that is completely surrendered to you. So here he's not talking about karma as a path, but as a result.
Thank you, Michael.
Is that
Again, I think
clear?
we cannot do. Yes, it is clear, Michael. I think there is one other word which you read, like unnai kandu. I mean,
Yes.
first we should know
Always seeing
ourselves.
you.
Only then,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
only then we can do this. If we do it mentally,
yeah.
it will not. It is not what Bhagavan is saying.
Unnai here
Unnai
me.
kandu
Yes, Unnai here is
self-aware.
referring to Arunachala. But a few verses
Yes.
earlier, he says, Nityamum nan endru ideatil naditu. He's always dancing in the heart as I. So the Arunachala we have to see always is that I. So knowing him and knowing ourselves are one and the same thing because he is ourself. He is our swarupa, what we actually are.
Thank you, Michael. I think we have some question. Um, I don't know who asked first, so I'll let Sridhar go with your question, and then we'll come back to you, Steve. Sridhar, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, Michael. It's always very nice to see you and hear from you. And so thank you for that. Uh, Everything you have said, and even the questions, people have asked, it's always there in front of us. Do your duty while still, realizing that it is in His name that it's happening, and don't be attached to the fruits of your duty. And so I don't have a question as much as one time, maybe a couple sessions ago when we had talked, I had the same thing and I couldn't remember exactly what you had said, but it is something like this. We seem to float, we are sort of neither here nor there. Like we float between these two spaces, right? And there are flashes of awareness that I'm just executing His will and let it happen. And somewhere along in there is this irrational fear that I hope I don't land into the same place again, because to get here is very tough. You had said something about that. So anyway, I just wanted to hear it again.
Well, if we were left to our own devices, we would certainly go through the same thing again and again and again. But we have a very, very great power which is working on our side. That is the power of Bhagavan's grace. The power of his grace is the power of that his grace is the infinite love that he has for us as himself. So that is the ultimate reality. So he will never let us down. We will certainly let ourselves down. We are constantly letting ourselves down. Every time we allow our mind to go out towards anything, towards any Vishaya, we are letting ourselves down. But however much we let ourselves down, he will pull us back again and again and again. So we truly have nothing to fear on this path. Because though though, as I say, if we were left to our own devices, we would definitely fail in this endeavor. But because his grace won't allow us to fail. But we need to, his grace works through us. So we need to do our part. We need to, his grace is, as he said, grace is from within, it's pulling us within. From outside, it's pushing us. But we've got to cooperate. We've got to try to turn within, because our trying to turn within is our yielding ourselves to the inward pull of his grace. I don't know if that's what that's what I said last time, but that seemed to be the appropriate thing to say now.
Yes, thank you, Michael. No, it is just this thing that it has taken, as you said, so many lifetimes to get to where we are.
Yeah.
And we should not worry about what's going to happen or whether we would
How
even be.
how have we got to where we are? It's entirely by his grace. So
Yeah.
the same grace that has brought us here is not going to abandon us.
Yeah.
We may abandon him, but he will not abandon us. And we can't abandon him for long because he'll pull us back again.
Right. All right. Thank you, Michael.
Even to have this trust in him is also his grace. It's only by his grace that we have trust in his grace. As Manikavasika sang, Avanaralale Avantal Vanangi. That is bowing down, worshipping his feet only by his grace. So
Thank you,
every
Michael.
moment we are self-attentive, it is his grace working in us, pulling our mind back within, and we are just yielding ourselves to that.
Thank you, Michael.
Every
The next
moment that
question is from Steve.
we're not yielding ourselves to that, every moment that we're going outward, we are obstructing his grace. But his grace is very patient. In the second last verse of Aksharamlai, Bhagavan addresses Arunachal as Porumayam Budara, the hill of patience, the hill that is patience itself. So he is infinitely patient. So however many times we go running outwards, he will patiently pull us back within.
Right. Good. Thank you, Michael.
Right. All thanks to Bhagavan.
Next question we have is
The
from
infinite
Steve.
hill of patience, the infinite ocean of patience.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
So next question we have is from Steve. I have the recently published book Ramana Maharishi's Core Writings and wondered if there is or if there is not a natural order to study Bhagavan's original writings. Or is it a case for each person to start studying Bhagavan's writings wherever you feel most drawn?
I think the latter. There's a traditional order in Arunachala, in Ramana Nutaratu, Bhagavan's collected works in Tamil. It starts with the 5 hymns. First Aksharammalai, then Navamanimalai, Patikam, Ashtakam, Pancharatnam. Then come the Upadesha works, Upadesha Undiya, Uladu Napadu, Uladu Napadu Anabandam, then Ekama Panchakam, Apalapatu, and Anma Vidde. Those are all the original poetic works of Bhagavan. Then the next section is all the translations, which is divided in 2 parts. Firstly, the verse translations, which includes I think I'll just that is what he translated from other languages. That begins with firstly 2 chapters that he translated from Shaiva Agamas, but which have a Dvaitic import. Devi Kalotram, Jnana Vichara Padalam, Jnana Achara Vichara Padalam, and Sava Jnanotara Atma Sakshakara Prakanam. So those are 2 chapters from Shaiva Agamas, but have a Dvaitic import. He translated those. Then Bhagavad Gita Saram, 42 verses that he selected from Bhagavad Gita, arranged in a particular order and translated. Then Dakshinamurti Stotram, which is a work of Shankara. Anma Bodham, which is also a work of Shankara. I think Anma Bodham is the last work he composed. I think that was after the last original work was Ekama Panchakam, which is about 1946 or so. And then sometime after that, he translated all about Mabodham. And then Guru Stuti and Hastamalakam. Those are they're works associated with Shankara, not necessarily Shankara's own works. and then two works that he translated in prose, namely Viveka Chudamani and Drisya Viveka. And then come the three original prose works, Nana, Vichara Sangraham, and Upadesha Manjari. So that's the order it's given. That's the order it's always been in the Tamil collective works. But for many people, Nana is the best place to start. I think many of us, that's for us the first introduction. So Nana is a very good place to start. But really, these are all very, very deep works. So we get out of them what we put into them. That is how deeply we read them, and how much we try to put what Bhagavan is teaching us there, how much we try to put it into practice, so much we will benefit by them. So it's and these are texts which well, for me, Nana was the first work I read. Probably not a very good English translation, but that was enough to kindle my interest. That was nearly 50 years ago now. I still read Nana. I mean, I don't. It's almost much of it I know almost by heart. It's so familiar to me. So though I may not read it, those ideas are so much in my mind. That is most wonderful, wonderful work, for which we owe a great debt of gratitude to Shiva Prakasham Pillai. And then Bhagavan's the works Bhagavan gave for Murgana, Anma Vidya, Upadeshundya, Uludunapadu. These are tremendously important works. And of course, Arunachal Stuti Panchakam is really the very heart of it all. What the driving force that is in the Upadesha works. Bhagavan tells us what we should do. Through Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, he lights that fire of love to follow to follow and to persevere in following the path he's taught us. So all very, very important works.
Thank you, Michael. I think there are some follow-up questions on the books. Bhagavan translated
Hastamalakam.
Hastamalakyam. Yes, Hastamalakam. So that's a question. So I think yes.
Yes.
And then
yes.
there's a question from Deepthi. Can you please post the names of original work of Bhagavan's book, so I'll buy them from Amazon? I don't think I'm not sure whether we have the Nul Tirat in Amazon.
Is it in Tamil you want, or in do you want translation?
Deepthi?
I'm looking the English versions. I do not know Tamil, so.
Okay, right. If you go to my website, which is ramanateachings.org, Sri ramanateachings.org, there's a page of translations. There you can find links to all my. I'm still working on my translations, but most of these works, most of Bhagavan's original writings, I've translated, and that page gives links to all the places where I've translated it. So they're not in book form, but they're there. Someone referred to the core writings. That is Sandra compiled from all these sources, all the things I've translated. She compiled them and compiled them as a book. So if you wanted a book form, that core writings, it's called, I think, core writing. Ramana Maharshi's core writings, I think it's called.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Eric. I think they have posted those links, Michael,
Okay.
whatever you are discussing. Yeah.
Okay.
Core
Thank you,
teachings and
Michael.
also your website and everything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Next, we have a question from Sanjay Lohia. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. So in yesterday's meeting with Ramana Foundation, you said something to the following effect. When we begin to try to free ourselves from ignorance, Maya helps us in this process. So I thought only grace is helping us, but what you are saying here is that, that eventually even Maya will become our ally. Could you please explain this further?
Grace and Maya are truly, there's only one power. That one power is Bhagavan. That one power is what works as grace. It also works as Maya. So long as we are enamored by this world, it works in the form of Maya. But the power behind the power of Maya is the power of grace. Actually, they're one and the same. They're two different. That is all. Maya is there because of our desires and attachments and our liking for all these things. But grace is working there to slowly wean us off all our desires and everything. So we can say Maya is handled by Bhagavan's grace in such a way to be most conducive to our spiritual development. For example, it is said Bhagavan has allotted our prarabdha. All that we experience as our prarabdha, it's all Maya. It's all of this is Maya. But he has shaped Maya in such a way that will be most conducive to our spiritual development. That's why I think I mentioned yesterday there's one song of Sadhu Om in Ramana Geetam in which he says something to the effect, why should I fear this Maya? This Maya is Bhagavan, I don't know exactly what term he used, something like it is the handmaiden of Bhagavan. That is, she is the one who is controlling this Maya is Bhagavan. So Maya can't do anything to us if we surrender ourselves to Bhagavan. Maya will give us all sorts of troubles so long as we do not surrender ourselves. But to the extent to which we surrender ourselves to Bhagavan, the Maya will only do what is beneficial for us.
Got it, sir. Got it, sir. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, the Panchakrityas, the Tirodhana, the veil is also God's work.
Yeah.
And also,
That is the Avarana Shakti, which is what the fundament. Maya has two powers. The Avarana Shakti is the veiling. We have to be, if we know what we actually are, we won't experience any of this, or we won't experience all this. But because we are covered by that veil of ajnana, we see all this multiplicity. So the projection of the multiplicity is Vikshepa. The fundamental covering is the avarana. So the tirodhana or tirobhava, that is the avarana. The shrishti sthiti samhara, that is all the Vikshepa. And the power that removes the root ignorance, that is grace. And that is the function of Guru. That is Bhagavan's function.
thank you, Michael. And also, the Maya is continuously showing us we won't get happiness outside. And that's also helping us turn, teaching us there is nothing here.
Maya tempts us, but disappoints us every time. So sooner or later, as dull-headed people, we get the message, oh, this is not going to work. We're not going to get the happiness there are so many alluring things in this world. Oh, if I have this, I'll be happy. If I have that, I'll be happy. But they will all disappoint us. In South India, there's a tree, the silk cotton tree. It's got its fruit are long pods. And there's a verse in Guru Vachakakavai in which Bhagavan refers to that. These long pods, they never ripen. After some time, they dry up and they burst, and out come all the seeds, which have a fine silk-like covering, and that enables them to get dispersed in the wind. That's why it's called silk cotton, because if people harvest that and they separate out the seeds and they make cushions and mattresses and things like that out of that. But what Bhagavan says in Guru Vachakakavai, this world is like that, the fruit of that silk cotton tree. The parrot will be waiting, expecting that fruit to ripen. And you'll wait and wait and wait, and finally the fruit will just burst, and there's nothing edible inside. It's all just silk cotton. It's just like cotton wool. So the parrot will be disappointed. Like that, if we expect to get happiness in this world, we will be disappointed, inevitably.
Thank you, Michael. I think that
Not
is the
only
end
this
of all
world, even
questions.
other worlds. Even if we go to the highest heaven, even if we go to Brahmaloka, that happiness will not satisfy us. Because what we actually are is infinite happiness. Whatever highest happiness we may experience in the highest heaven, it's still finite. So it will disappoint us. We will not be satisfied even in the highest heaven.
Thank you, Michael. I think that is the end of all questions for today.
Right.
Can we conclude, Michael, or you have anything else to say?
Yeah, no, that's
I
all.
have a
That's all.
question.
Oh, someone
Sorry,
has a
go
question.
ahead. I think somebody has. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So give me a moment. Namaskaram, Michael.
Namaskaram.
Michael, this is from Drikdrishya Viveka.
Yes.
So let me read it in Tamil slowly,
Yeah.
and I will let you know that out. So, தேகம் ஜடமாய் இருக்கும் ஆழ்ந்த உறக்கத்தில் அகங்காரம் நான் முழுவதும் லயித்திருக்கும். அது பாதி விரிந்தது கனவு, முழுவதும் விரிந்தது நினைவு. மனவிருத்தி தான் பூர்வ வாசனையால். நினைவுகளின் உற்பத்தி தான் முன் அனுபவத்தால். கனவில் ஆந்திர உள் பிரபஞ்சத்தையும் நினைவில் பாகிய வெளிப்பிரபஞ்சத்தையும் கற்பிக்கின்றது. இம்மனம் அகங்காரங்களுக்கு தொடர்புடைய ஜடலிங்க தேகமே காற்றினால் புழுதி திரண்டு ஒரு உருவம் எழுவது போல் அவஸ்தாத்ரியத்தையும், அதாவது ஆழ்ந்த உறக்கம், கனவு, நினைவு, பிறப்பு, இறப்பாதைகளையும் அடைகிறது. So here, Michael, what is this Jadalinga Degam?
I think Linga Deham is, I think, if I remember correctly, it is the Sukshma Sarira is sometimes referred to as the Linga Sarira or Linga Deham, I think.
This is Jada. They have mentioned as Jada Linga Degam.
All the 5 sheaves are Jada. Bhagavan says in Upadesh Undya, this verse 22, I think it is. Yeah, I'm sure it's 22. He says, Udu Pori Ullum Weir Udal is the physical body. Pori here, I think, is referring to the mind. Ullum is probably the intellect. Weir is the prana. Anyway, it's referring to he's referring to the 5 sheaves there, and he says Elam Jadam Asat Anadal. Since they're all Jada and Asat, Satana Nanala, they're not I. So all the five sheaves are jada. If you think of it, this body is an object known by us. The prana is an object known by us. All the physiological function, the breathing and all the everything that's happening in the body, all the vital forces or whatever, they're all objects known by us. The mind consisting of perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on, all objects known by us. The working of the intellect, it's all, we know it objectively. I mean, we know it as objects. And likewise, the Anandamaya kosha, the chittam, the will, it consists of vasanas. All those vasanas are things that we know as objects. We know we have inclination to do this, inclination to do that. They're all jada. What knows all these things is ahankara. Ahankara is that chit jada granti. It's got that element of chit in it, though it's identified with the jada five pancha kosha.
So the ahankaram it's an infinite, correct, Michael? It is like it looks to be bounded by the body because of the jada chit jada granthi.
Yeah.
It is okay.
Yeah.
And
that is, ego has no separate existence of its own. It seems to have a separate existence only when it grasps the body as I. That's why Bhagavan refers to it as uruvatra peyahande. It's formless. Since it's got no form, it's got no limits. Because what it essentially is Sat-Chit. But when ego is as he says in the previous verse 24 of Ulladu, it's neither the body, meaning the five sheaths which are jada, because they're not jada udulna nenadu. The jada body does not say I. That means the body is not aware of itself as I, because it's jada, it's devoid of awareness. Sat-Chit udiyadu, Sat-Chit doesn't rise. But in between, one thing rises as the extent of the body. That one thing that rises the extent of the body, that is ego. Since it rises, it's not Sat-Chit. But since it's aware of itself as I, it's not the body. So that's why he says in between. That means it's neither Sat-Chit nor that, but it's a mixture of both. That's why it's called Chit Jada Granti. But not formed by the entanglement of Chit and Jada. Of course, Chit is never entangled. But from the perspective of ego, we as awareness seem to be entangled with this body.
So this Lingadegam arises from the Karana Sharira, correct, Michael?
Yeah, because the Karana Sharira consists of vasanas, and the vasanas are the seeds that give rise to everything else.
So when the physical body dies, this Jadalinga will continue with all the impression of that person, correct, Michael?
Yes, that is in classical in most of the classical Advaita texts, it is said, though the Stula Deha passes away, the Sukshma Sarira goes on to another life. But it doesn't mean that we need to understand that in the correct sense. Bhagavan, in verse 24 of Ulladu, he says ego itself is the subtle body. What he means by that is, when it is said, that is the same term subtle body can be used in different senses. When it is said the subtle body goes on to the next life, it doesn't mean the subtle body, often said to be pranamaya kosha, manamaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha. It doesn't mean these go on to another life. It means ego goes on to another life. So in that text, when it is said the subtle body goes on to another life, it's referring to ego as the subtle body. What ego takes with it are the vasanas. The vasanas are the seeds that contain they're the seeds that give rise to all the other sheaths, Vijnanamaya kosha, Manomaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, Annamaya kosha. They all sprout from these seeds. In fact, the whole world sprouts from these seeds. But we shouldn't dwell too much on these things, because the whole point is none of these things are real. They all appear only when we rise as ego. So the root cause for the rising of all these things is ego. So if we investigate this ego and find that what seemed to be ego is actually just Sat-Chit, so there's no such thing as ego, therefore there's no such thing as world or anything else. Because otherwise, when we analyze these things too much, we tend to take all these things as real. And then how does this come out of this and that come out of this? And it becomes unnecessarily complicated. Our aim is to know who am I, not to know what are all these. We are seeking to know the reality of Purusha. So in order to know the reality of Purusha, we need to separate ourselves from Prakriti, to put it in Sankhyan terms. So all this phenomena is Prakriti. We are Purusha. So who am I? That is what we are. The whole point is to investigate and know what we actually are. The central point of Drisya Viveka, the text, is to point out the distinction between the seer and the seen, between the kshetra and the kshetrajna.
The real seer is
Everything
the
we know
infinite.
is kshetra. We are the kshetrajna. So who is this kshetrajna? If we investigate it, we find it is nothing but Krishna himself, Bhagavan himself.
That's when the seer, seeing, and the seeing, the Triputi becomes one, right? Like there is
But
like
Bhagavan says that clearly in Uludunapadu, in verse 9 of Uludunapadu, irate mupadigal. Irate is the pairs of opposites. And mupadigal is the triputi, the seer, seen and seeing. All these exist only holding on to one. What is that one? That one is ego, which is the knower, the seer. And if we investigate in the mind what that one is, they all fall off, because that one itself ceases to exist.
then what remains is the absolute. Because if when
Yes.
the ego
Yeah.
comes into, if the ego comes into existence, then Ishvara comes into existence. Then every
Everything,
act,
everything.
yeah. So the consequences is inherent in the act itself, no, Michael. So everybody in this world create chaos, they destabilize everything. The destruction is inevitably, it's suffering everywhere. So everybody's action will be will have a consequences because of the self manifested as Ishvara, correct, Michael? Because
Yes.
if the ego comes into existence, then the self will come into Ishvara.
Yeah, that is when we limit ourselves as this person, our unlimited reality appears to us as something other than ourselves. That is what we call Ishvara. But the reality of Ishvara and the reality of ourself is one and the same. As Bhagavan says in Upadesha Undya, verse 24. Irakum ekayal isa jivagal oru paraleava undipara upadi unave verundipara. That is, by their being nature, God and soul are just one substance, one portal, one vastu. It's the upadi unavu, the awareness of of adjuncts, but makes it seem different. The limiting adjuncts. Upadhi means the limiting adjuncts. So when we take ourselves to be this body, we limit ourselves. So we see God as other than ourselves. By seeing God as other than ourselves, we're also limiting God. So we say He's all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving, everything. We attribute all these things to Him, but it's still a limitation because we seem to be separate from Him. When we know Him as He actually is, we'll know that He's our own very being. There's no separation whatsoever.
In only one case, in Anubandham, where Bhagavan clearly mentions, only with Guru we should maintain that. We are not one with Guru.
Yeah,
Guru is always
because
the
Guru is the ultimate form of God. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, they have their work to do. Brahma's got to create the world, Vishnu's got to sustain it, Shiva's got to dissolve it. But what is the work of Guru? Guru is to remove that veiling, that tirudana, tirubhava, under the cover of which all this creation, sustenance, and dissolution take place. So the function of Guru is the ultimate function of God. That is anugraha.
So only with Guru, there is that's why
Yeah,
Bhagavan always has Arunachala as his Guru, because
exactly,
though it is one reality, it is still
exactly.
Shishya.
He teaches us by example.